Hello and welcome to Edison TV. I'm Josh Babs, Director of Investment Trust Content at Edison, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Lucie Majstrova, who is Investment Specialist for Private Companies for Baillie Gifford. We are here to discuss the Schiehallion Fund, which seeks to generate capital growth from long-term minority investments in later stage private companies, which it believes to have transformational growth potential and the potential for a public listing. Lucie, many thanks for coming in today.
No, thank you very much for inviting me.
Maybe we can start with you providing us some background on the Schiehallion Fund and its investment approach.
So Schiehallion Fund aims to provide its investors access to the world's most exceptional private growth companies. Now, private growth is a relatively new asset class. It really started emerging in 2010s as companies were dealing a listing, right? So when Amazon went public in 1997 at a $500 million valuation, or Tesla was going public at roughly $2 billion valuation, then in the 2010s, what we were seeing is companies dealing a listing. So that's how we started investing in the private markets in 2012 with our first investment in Alibaba. And then by 2019, we basically built up enough muscle and confidence in our ability to be very good at private growth investing to build a dedicated private growth portfolio. And this is really how Schiehallion was born. It was to solve a problem for our clients, a problem of completing essentially their growth portfolio with the companies that were now staying on the other side of the IPO line.
Thank you. That's a very helpful introduction. Now, in December 2025, the Schiehallion Fund changed its listing segment from the specialist fund segment to the main markets closed-ended investment fund segment. So maybe you can talk us through the significance of this shift.
Yeah, I think basically this shift is a part of the maturation of Schiehallion as a fund, right? I see the last years really completing this journey because in 2019, the fund, we didn't market it broadly. It was really offered just to a small number of our institutional investors. And even the sort of internal, I'm not sure whether it's a joke or reality, is that we named it Schiehallion so that nobody can find it. It's just a bit of a cryptic name named after a Scottish mountain. And then when we raised capital in 2021, it was at the time that UK wealth managers came on board. And now, what's happening last year is that the portfolio was getting fully invested, and it was becoming a bit more clear what the shape of the portfolio is going to look like. So the board decided that it's becoming ready for a broader audience. The shareholders supported this view, and it then became first just listed for general public, but then also became part of the FTSE 250 on the 23rd of March of this year.
Perfect, thank you. I'm sure that the change in the listing segment will put the company on the radar of more investors. Now, what I also wanted to talk about is the company's recent strong performance with the NAV total return for the financial year to the end of January 2026 at 32.6%. So maybe you can tell us more about the main drivers behind this performance.
Yeah, I think it's been it's been a very good year for us, but it's part of a broader story, right? Because let's say 2022 was a big reset in valuations for growth companies and private growth alike. And it really flushed out some of the capital out of that market. There were some, the previous boom was attracting different participants in the market, was driving valuations up. So this has really flushed it out. But, unfortunately, this is also reflected in the performance for the fund during that time. But then, what we are starting to see over the last 2 years is the maturation of some of the good investments. We've made some of the successful investments that really started pulling ahead and demonstrating the return asymmetry that is inherent to growth investing. So it's a bit of a setup to saying basically over the last year, we've seen the biggest positions in the portfolio driving performance, right? So it was the likes of SpaceX, where we've seen multiple revaluations. It's the likes of Bending Spoons, the Italian software acquisition company. It's really training, its acquisition machine on bigger and bigger targets and compounding growth at a very fast clip. So, we've seen progress there, both on the operational side, and the valuations are reflective of that. But then, also Anthropic, a recent purchase, is really firing on all cylinders. So these are the, let's say, the top companies, but underneath that, there is, what we would almost call the next generation of winners, such as Vinted or Anduril. They've been all performing exceptionally well as well.
Thank you so much. So you've touched upon the strong operational performance. So maybe you can shed some light on the main KPIs across your portfolio, such as revenue growth, profitability, and the cash flow profile.
Yeah. So when you look at the portfolio in total, the revenue growth, so the top line growth of the portfolio, is about 2.5 times that of the Nasdaq 100. So Nasdaq 100 is a very tech-heavy index. It includes NVIDIA, which is really the main driver of revenue growth in there. But this huge multiple of what you can see in this tech-heavy public index is it's a good benchmark for understanding what growth looks like on the private side, right? So it's a much faster growth, but it doesn't really come at a cost of fundamentals. About 2/3 of the portfolio is profitable. And when you want to look at the sort of cash outlook, about half of the portfolio is either public or cash generative, and it's less than 20% of the companies in there have less than 2 years of cash runway. So it's very strong fundamentals coupled with very fast pace of growth.
Excellent, thank you. And to be also helpful to understand the Schiehallion Fund's approach to its companies, which after they IPO'd, right? And also the recycling of proceeds from listed companies into new private opportunities, which I think our listeners would be interested in, especially in the context of the upcoming SpaceX IPO.
Yeah, absolutely understand that. So what Schiehallion is really set up to do is to invest in companies we believe have the transformative potential for multiple X of growth, so they can become multiples, of their current size. And this we see is happening in the private markets, but one day the time comes that they will list publicly, and then we will use the public part of the portfolio as a sourcing pot for our new investments in the new generation of private growth companies. And this is something we've been doing from the start. So we've already seen 12 IPOs in the portfolio, 3 companies were acquired, but we've also been using the emerging secondary market on the private side to trim some positions or liquidate positions that we were not happy with. So in this way, we have already reinvested close to $400 million back into the portfolio. And now that the fund is fully invested, we'll just be seeing much more of that, right? Because the cash balance is very low, the public proportion sits at around 10%. So we will be seeing, as we're seeing more IPOs, and, you name SpaceX, Anthropic have been mentioning that they might be heading towards an IPO. I think within the top 10, there's more companies that might be strong IPO candidates in the near future. So we will be seeing much more of this process. And we're hugely excited about the pipeline. There's still so many companies we're meeting with very strong business models, good path to profitability, fast growing top lines, great founders. So there's definitely so much to go for.
Thank you so much for the very insightful conversation. And yeah, thank you again for joining me today.
Thank you very much.